The Texas sun beat down mercilessly on the corrugated metal roof of Marcus Sullivan's trailer, turning the interior into an oven by 10 in the morning. Sweat beaded on his forehead as he stood in the cramped kitchenette, staring at the stack of bills spread across the counter like a losing poker hand. Medical bills mostly, $8,247 in outstanding charges from the VA hospital, plus another $1,200 for the private therapist he'd seen twice before, deciding he couldn't afford to keep going. Marcus was 42, but looked older. His dark hair had gone prematurely grey at the temples, and deep lines creased his face, not from laughter, but from nights spent jerking awake at 3 in the morning, heart hammering, convinced he was back in Kandahar. His hands trembled slightly as he picked up the eviction notice. 30 days. That's all the time Raymond Kowalski, the trailer park manager, had given him. "Damn it, Dad," Marcus whispered to the empty room. "What would you do?" His father, William Sullivan, had been a mechanic at a Ford dealership in San Antonio for 37 years, a man who could fix anything with an engine, who'd taught Marcus everything about cars before Marcus enlisted in the army at 19. William had died of a heart attack 4 years ago, right around the time Marcus's marriage to Jennifer was falling apart. The timing had been cruel. Losing his father while simultaneously watching his wife pack her bags, unable to handle Marcus's nightmares, his anger, his inability to hold down a steady job after coming home from his 3rd deployment. Marcus walked to the small living area where cardboard boxes lined the walls, possessions he'd never fully unpacked after moving into this place 2 years ago. He knelt beside one marked "Dad Stuff" in faded marker. Inside were his father's things. An old Craftsman wrench set, a Stetson hat worn soft with age, a few photographs, and a collection of vinyl records. William Sullivan had loved country music the way some men love football or fishing, George Strait especially. "The king of country," his father would say, playing those records on Saturday mornings while working on cars in their driveway. Marcus could still hear his father's off-key singing, mixing with the sound of socket wrenches and the smell of motor oil. He pulled out the records one by one. "Straight from the Heart," "Does Fort Worth Ever Cross Your Mind?" "Ocean Front Property." Each one brought back memories he'd been trying to avoid. Simpler times, before war, before divorce, before everything fell apart. Then his fingers touched the last record, straight out of the box, a greatest hits collection. Marcus pulled it from its sleeve carefully, and his breath caught. Across the front, in black Sharpie, was a signature, "Keep It Country, George Strait." He'd forgotten about this. His father had won it in some radio contest back in 1995, had been so proud of it that he'd displayed it in a frame in his workshop for years. After William died, Marcus had packed everything away without really looking at it, too grief-stricken and angry at the world to care about sentimental items. Now, holding it in his hands, an idea formed. Marcus grabbed his phone and typed into Google, "George Strait autographed vinyl value." The results made his eyes widen. Authenticated signatures could sell for anywhere from $500 to $2,000, depending on condition and the item. His heart began to race, not the panicked racing that accompanied his PTSD episodes, but something else. Hope, maybe, or desperation dressed up as hope. He looked at the eviction notice again, then at the record, $200. If he could get even $200, that would buy him time. He could negotiate with Kowalski, pay something toward the back rent, keep a roof over his head for another month while he figured things out. By noon, Marcus was walking through the doors of Lone Star Records, where he worked part-time as a janitor and stock clerk. The store sat on a quiet corner of South Alamo Street, a neighborhood that had seen better days but was slowly gentrifying. Lone Star Records was an institution, a throwback to when people actually bought physical music, owned by a 67-year-old named Patricia Dalton, who refused to let the digital age kill her business. "Marcus," Patricia called from behind the counter. She was a small woman with short silver hair and cat-eye glasses that made her look like a librarian from a 1960s movie. "You're not scheduled until 3 today." "I know, Miss Patricia. I need to talk to you about something." The store smelled like old paper and vinyl, a scent Marcus had come to find comforting over the past 18 months of working here. Wooden bins full of records lined the walls, organized by genre and decade. A vintage turntable sat in the corner, quietly playing Willie Nelson's Red-Headed Stranger. 2 customers browsed the jazz section, speaking in hushed tones. Marcus approached the counter and carefully set the George Strait record down. "This was my dad's. It's autographed. I was hoping maybe you could sell it for me on consignment, or, I don't know, maybe buy it outright." Patricia picked up the record, her expression immediately shifting to one of professional scrutiny. She examined the signature closely, tilting it under the light. "Marcus, honey, where did your father get this?" "Radio contest, 1995, Kaja 97, 3, I think. He kept it framed in his workshop." "Have you had it authenticated?" Marcus's heart sank a little. "No, I can't afford to get it authenticated. I need some money, Miss Patricia. I'm getting evicted in 30 days, and I thought maybe this could help." Patricia's eyes softened behind her glasses. She'd been kind to Marcus since he started working here, never prying too much into his past, always patient when he had bad days. She knew he was a veteran, knew he struggled, and she'd given him this job when no one else would take a chance on a guy with gaps in his employment history and a tendency to flinch at loud noises. "How much do you need?" $200. "Just enough to pay Kowalski something, buy some time." Patricia sighed, setting the record down gently. "Marcus, I'll be honest with you. Without authentication, I can't sell this for what it might actually be worth. But I can give you $200 for it. Take it on consignment, and if it sells for more after I get it authenticated, I'll give you the difference minus my commission. How does that sound?" Relief washed through Marcus like cool water. "Really? You'd do that? Your father was a good man. If this record meant something to him, it deserves to find the right home." "But Marcus," she paused, choosing her words carefully, "have you thought about other options? There are veteran services, organizations that help with housing." "I've tried," Marcus interrupted, his jaw tightening. "I'm on waiting lists. Everything's a waiting list. The VA is backlogged. The non-profits are overwhelmed. I just need to get through the next few months until my disability claim gets processed, and then I'll be okay." It was a lie, and they both knew it. He wouldn't be okay. The money wouldn't fix the nightmares or the guilt or the bone-deep exhaustion of carrying invisible wounds that no one could see. But Patricia didn't call him on it. "All right," she said softly. "Let me get you the cash." As Patricia walked to the back office, Marcus felt his phone vibrate. A text from his ex-wife, Jennifer. "Tyler made the baseball team. Thought you'd want to know." Tyler. His son, 12 years old now, living with Jennifer and her new husband in Austin, a 2-hour drive that might as well be 1,000 miles. Marcus hadn't seen Tyler in 8 months. Every time he planned a visit, something got in the way. Money, anxiety, the crushing shame of having his son see him living in a trailer park, working as a janitor, barely holding on. He typed back, "That's great. Tell him I'm proud of him." The response came quickly. "You should tell him yourself." Marcus stared at the message, his throat tight. She was right. He should. But how could he face his son like this? What kind of example was he setting? What could he possibly say that wouldn't sound like excuses? Patricia returned with an envelope containing 10 $20 bills. "Here you go, Marcus. I'll put the record in the display case, see if we get any interest. And listen, you're a good worker. If you need more hours, I can probably find them for you." "Thank you, Miss Patricia. Really, thank you." As he left the store, clutching the envelope, Marcus felt the temporary relief already beginning to fade. $200. It would keep Kowalski from calling the sheriff for maybe 2 weeks. Then what? Another crisis, another desperate solution, another piece of his father's legacy sold off to survive 1 more month. The afternoon heat hit him like a physical force as he walked toward the bus stop. San Antonio in summer was unforgiving, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and the pavement soft. He thought about his father again, about those Saturday mornings, about the version of himself that used to exist, the kid who thought he'd take over his dad's business someday, who believed in simple solutions and honest work, and the idea that if you did right by people, things would turn out okay. That version of Marcus Sullivan had died somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. What was left was just a man trying not to drown. 3 days later, Marcus stood in the back room of Lone Star Records, mopping a floor that didn't really need mopping. It was a Thursday afternoon, slow for business, and Patricia had given him busy work just to justify the hours. He didn't mind. The repetitive motion was meditative, gave his hands something to do besides shake. Through the doorway, he could see the main floor of the store. His father's George Strait record sat in the display case near the register, a small handwritten card beneath it. Autographed George Strait, straight out of the box, $350 OBO. Patricia had decided to price it higher than the $200 she'd given him, hoping to authenticate it eventually and make back her investment. Marcus appreciated that she was trying to help him, even if it meant taking a risk herself. The door chime rang, and Marcus glanced up to see a man enter. Nothing remarkable about him, maybe late 50s, average height, wearing worn Wrangler jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a navy blue cap pulled low over his eyes. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent a lot of time outdoors, working with his hands. Just another Texan, the kind you'd see at any hardware store or barbecue joint across the state. The man moved through the store with the comfortable pace of someone who actually appreciated music, not just browsing to kill time. He flipped through the country section, pulled out a few records, examined them, put them back. There was something deliberate about his movements, like he knew exactly what he was looking for. Patricia was helping another customer, an older woman looking for vintage Beatles albums, so the man continued browsing undisturbed. Eventually, he made his way to the display case near the register, and Marcus watched as his attention fixed on the George Strait record. The man studied it for a long moment, then straightened up and looked around. His eyes landed on Patricia. "Excuse me, ma'am. Could I take a closer look at this Strait record?" Patricia excused herself from the Beatles customer and came over, unlocking the display case. Of course, beautiful piece. Came from the estate collection recently. That wasn't quite true, but Marcus understood why Patricia had worded it that way. It sounded better than desperate veterans selling his dead father's possessions. The man took the record carefully, holding it with the practiced ease of someone who knew how to handle vinyl. He examined the signature closely, tilting it toward the light, running his finger lightly along the edge of the sleeve. His expression was unreadable. $350, the man said, more to himself than to Patricia. That's ambitious for an unauthenticated signature. "I'm planning to have it authenticated," Patricia replied, "but I'm open to negotiation for the right buyer. Are you a collector?" "You could say that," the man said, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "But I'd need to be sure this is genuine before I paid that kind of money. A lot of fake Strait signatures floating around out there." Marcus felt something clench in his chest. Fake. His father had won that record legitimately, had kept it for 20 years, had treasured it. The impulse to defend it rose up before he could stop himself. He stepped out of the back room, still holding the mop. "It's real." The man turned to look at him, and Marcus got his first good look at the stranger's face. Blue eyes, crow's feet from smiling or squinting in the sun, a strong jawline. Something familiar about him, but Marcus couldn't place it. Probably just looked like half the middle-aged men in Texas. You sound pretty certain, the man said, not unkindly. It was my father's. He won it in a radio contest in 1995, Kaja 97. 3. He kept it framed in his workshop until the day he died. It's real. The man nodded slowly, absorbing this information. I'm not doubting your father's honesty, son. I'm just saying that authentication matters in this market. A signature without provenance is hard to value. Provenance, Marcus repeated, the word tasting bitter. It's real because my father wasn't a liar, because he loved George Strait's music, played it every Saturday morning while we worked on cars together, because that record meant something to him. Marcus, Patricia said gently, a warning in her voice, but Marcus couldn't stop. The stress of the past weeks, the eviction notice, the shame of selling his father's things, the guilt about Tyler, it all came bubbling up. You know what? Even if I could prove it's real, you probably can't afford it anyway. You come in here questioning whether it's legitimate, acting like you're some kind of expert. Marcus. Patricia's voice was sharp now. That's enough. The man held up a hand, his expression calm. No, it's all right. He's just protecting his father's memory. I respect that. He looked at Marcus directly. You're right. Maybe I can't afford it. But I'll tell you what. If you can get this authenticated and it's genuine, I'll give you a fair price for it. More than $350. Marcus felt his face flush. He'd just insulted a potential customer, probably cost Patricia a sale. I'm sorry, I didn't mean... It's just been a rough week. We all have those, the man said. He set the record back down on the counter carefully. Tell me about your father. What kind of cars did you work on? The question caught Marcus off guard. What? You said you worked on cars with him on Saturday mornings. What kind of cars? All kinds. He was a mechanic at a Ford dealership. We'd work on our own projects at home, though, old trucks mostly. He had a 1967 F100 he was restoring when he died. The man's eyes lit up. No kidding, a 67 F100? That's a hell of a truck. Did he finish it? No, it's still in storage, half finished. I couldn't bring myself to work on it after he passed. That's tough. Losing a parent is hard enough without leaving their projects undone. The man paused, seeming to consider something. What happened to your hand? Marcus looked down. His right hand was trembling again, the fine tremor that came from stress and lack of sleep. He shoved it in his pocket. Nothing, just tired. You serve? The man asked quietly. What makes you think that? The way you stand. The way you scan the room when someone comes in. The haircut. I've been around enough veterans to recognize the signs. Marcus's jaw tightened. Army. 3 deployments. Afghanistan. The man nodded, something sad and understanding passing across his face. Thank you for your service. Sincerely. Yeah. Marcus hated that phrase. Everyone said it, and no one meant it. Or they meant it, but they had no idea what they were thanking him for. An awkward silence settled over the conversation. Patricia shifted uncomfortably behind the counter. Finally, the man pulled out his wallet and produced a business card. Look, I'm going to be in San Antonio for a few more days. If you decide to get that record authenticated, give me a call. I'm genuinely interested, and I'd like to help if I can. He handed the card to Patricia, not Marcus, perhaps sensing that Marcus was too proud or too agitated to accept it directly. Then he tipped his cap to them both and headed for the door. What's your name? Marcus called after him, surprising himself. The man turned back, that slight smile returning. George. George, Marcus repeated. I'm Marcus. Marcus Sullivan. Good to meet you, Marcus Sullivan. Take care of yourself. And then he was gone, the door chime ringing in his wake. Patricia immediately turned to Marcus, her expression torn between exasperation and concern. Marcus, you cannot talk to customers like that. I know you're going through a hard time, but I know. I'm sorry. I'll make it up to you. Extra hours, whatever you need." Patricia sighed, looking at the business card the man had left. Her eyes widened. "Oh my God! What?" She held up the card, her hand shaking slightly. It was plain white, no company name or logo. Just a phone number and a name printed in simple black text. George Strait. Marcus stared at it, then laughed. "That's a coincidence. Guy named George interested in a George Strait record." But Patricia was pulling out her phone, typing frantically. Then she turned the screen toward Marcus. It was a Google image search for George Strait, photo after photo of the country music legend, and every single one looked exactly like the man who'd just walked out of the store. The blood drained from Marcus's face. No way, that was George Strait," Patricia whispered. "That was actually George Strait in my store, and you just told him he couldn't afford a record with his own signature on it." Marcus felt like the floor was tilting beneath him. He grabbed the edge of the counter to steady himself. "Oh God, oh my God. I told George Strait he couldn't afford his own autograph. I basically called him too poor to—" He couldn't even finish the sentence. Patricia started laughing, a slightly hysterical sound. "This is insane. This is absolutely insane. George Strait was just in my store." "Why would George Strait be in your store?" Marcus demanded, as if Patricia had orchestrated this somehow. "I don't know. Maybe he collects his own memorabilia. Maybe he was just browsing. Maybe he's been in San Antonio for a concert or recording, or I don't know, Marcus, but that was definitely him." Marcus replayed the entire conversation in his head, each moment more mortifying than the last. The way he'd been defensive, almost aggressive. The way he'd implied the man couldn't afford the record. George Strait, worth an estimated $300 million, with more #1 hits than any artist in any genre of music, a living legend of country music, and Marcus had essentially told him he was too broke to buy his own autograph. "I need to sit down," Marcus said faintly. "You need to call him," Patricia said, waving the business card. "You need to call him and apologize, and maybe, just maybe, something good could come from this disaster." "I can't call George Strait. What would I even say? Sorry, I didn't recognize you. Sorry, I was a jerk. Please don't think all veterans are angry lunatics." Something like that, yes. Marcus ran both hands through his hair, his mind racing. This was surreal. This was beyond surreal. This morning, he'd woken up in his sweltering trailer, eaten ramen noodles for breakfast because that's all he could afford, and seriously contemplated whether he should just give up and move to a homeless shelter. Now he'd apparently insulted one of the most successful musicians in American history, in a case of cosmic irony so perfect it felt scripted. "He was nice about it," Marcus said quietly. "He could have said something, could have made me feel like an idiot, but he didn't. He just listened, asked about my dad, asked about the cars." "That's George Strait," Patricia said. "By all accounts, he's one of the most genuine, down-to-earth people in Nashville, despite everything he's accomplished." Marcus looked at the business card again, at the simple phone number. A direct line to George Strait. What were the odds? What were the astronomical, impossible odds that his father's most prized possession would bring the man himself into Marcus's life at the exact moment Marcus was at his lowest point? "I'm not calling him," Marcus said firmly. "I already embarrassed myself enough. I'll just let it go." He probably forgot about it the moment he walked out the door. But even as he said it, Marcus knew he was wrong. Something about the way George had looked at him, the way he'd asked questions and listened to the answers, suggested he hadn't forgotten at all. The question was, what happened next? Marcus didn't sleep that night. He lay in his trailer, the single oscillating fan doing nothing against the August heat, staring at the ceiling and replaying every excruciating moment of his interaction with George Strait. By 3 in the morning, he'd convinced himself that Patricia had been wrong, that it was just some guy who looked like George Strait, that there was no way a legendary musician would be randomly browsing a struggling record store in San Antonio. By 4 in the morning, he'd Googled enough to confirm that George Strait did indeed still live in Texas, did maintain a low profile, did occasionally show up in unexpected places without fanfare or security. There were stories online of him being spotted at small-town barbecue joints, at high school football games, living as normally as a megastar possibly could. By 5 in the morning, Marcus had drafted and deleted 17 different text messages to the number on the card, each one more pathetic than the last. By 6, when the sun started turning the trailer into an oven again, he gave up on sleep entirely and decided to go for a run, something his therapist had recommended for managing PTSD symptoms. He'd been sporadic about it, but this morning he needed to move, needed to do something with the anxious energy coursing through him. The streets of San Antonio were quiet at this hour, the city not yet awake. Marcus ran without direction, his worn sneakers slapping against pavement still cool from the night. He ran past the historic missions, past neighborhoods transitioning from low-income to gentrified, past taco trucks setting up for the breakfast crowd. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs ached and his mind finally, mercifully, quieted. When he checked his phone afterward, dripping with sweat at a bus stop, he found a text from an unknown number. "Marcus, this is George. The guy from the record store yesterday. If you're free this morning, I'd like to buy you breakfast. No pressure, just conversation. There's a place called Rosita's on Commerce Street. 8 a.m.? Marcus stared at the message for a full minute. This was real. This was actually happening. George Strait, the actual George Strait, wanted to have breakfast with him. His first instinct was to decline, to make up an excuse, to avoid the inevitable awkwardness, but something stopped him. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the fact that his father would have never forgiven him for turning down breakfast with his musical idol. Maybe it was just that Marcus had nothing left to lose. He texted back, "I'll be there." Rosita's was a hole-in-the-wall Mexican restaurant that had been serving breakfast tacos to San Antonio residents since 1978. The kind of place with mismatched chairs, a menu written on a chalkboard, and food so good that people drove across the city for it. When Marcus arrived at 7:55 a.m., showered and wearing his cleanest jeans and a button-up shirt that used to fit better before he'd lost weight from stress, he found George already there, sitting at a corner table. George stood and extended his hand. "Thanks for coming, Marcus." "Thanks for inviting me," Marcus said, shaking his hand. Up close, in better light, there was no mistaking who this was. "And thanks for not mentioning yesterday that you were, you." George laughed, a genuine sound. "I find that when I introduce myself by my full name, conversations tend to go differently. Not always in a good way. People get nervous, or they want something, or they start acting like I'm not just a regular person. I like to see how things unfold naturally." They sat down, and a waitress immediately appeared with coffee. She showed no sign of recognizing George, which Marcus found remarkable until he realized that this was probably intentional. George knew places where he could be left alone, where his presence was respected but not made into a spectacle. "You been coming here long?" Marcus asked. 20 years, on and off. "Best breakfast tacos in San Antonio, hands down. Get the barbacoa. You won't regret it." They ordered barbacoa for both, plus a side of papas con chorizo to share, and settled into a surprisingly comfortable silence while waiting for the food. Marcus had expected this to be excruciatingly awkward, but George had a way of putting people at ease, of making it feel like two regular guys having breakfast, rather than a struggling veteran sitting across from a music legend. "So," George said, after the waitress refilled their coffee, "tell me about Afghanistan." Marcus tensed. "That's a heavy topic for breakfast." "You don't have to if you don't want to, But I find that most veterans want someone to actually ask, actually listen, instead of just saying thank you and moving on. Marcus studied George's face, looking for insincerity or pity, but found neither. Just genuine interest. Why do you care? Because my nephew served. Marines. 2 deployments to Iraq. He came home different, and our family didn't know how to help him. He struggled for years before finally getting the support he needed. George paused. And because you looked like someone carrying a very heavy load yesterday, and I've been around long enough to recognize when someone needs a friend, even if they don't know it yet. Something in Marcus's chest cracked open. Maybe it was the exhaustion, or the stress, or the simple fact that someone was asking, really asking, but he found himself talking. He told George about enlisting at 19, about 3 deployments, about the friends he'd lost. He told him about the guilt of coming home when others didn't, about the nightmares, about the way loud noises made him flinch, about the marriage that couldn't survive his broken pieces. The food arrived, and they ate while Marcus talked, and George listened, really listened, asked follow-up questions, didn't try to fix anything or offer platitudes, just let Marcus speak. "My son," Marcus said eventually, his voice rough. "Tyler, he's 12, lives with his mom in Austin. I haven't seen him in 8 months because I can't stand the thought of him seeing me like this. Living in a trailer park, working as a janitor, barely holding it together. What kind of father does that make me?" "The kind who's trying," George said simply. "The kind who cares enough to worry about it. You know what makes someone a bad father? Not caring, not trying. You're doing both, even if you can't see it right now." "I had to sell my dad's record," Marcus said. "The one you looked at yesterday. Because I'm getting evicted and I'm drowning in medical bills and I've got nothing left. That record was one of the last things I had that connected me to my father, and I had to sell it for $200 just to survive another month." George set down his taco. "Marcus, about that record, I need to tell you something. You don't have to buy it. I know I made things weird yesterday." "That signature is real," George interrupted. "I should know. I signed it." Marcus blinked. "You what?" "Kaiser 97-3-1995. I did a radio promotion, signed about 200 albums for contest winners. Your father's signature is genuine, and it's worth more than $350, Marcus. Authenticated, you could probably get 1,500, maybe 2,000 from the right collector." The number hit Marcus like a physical blow. $2,000. That was 3 months of rent. That was catching up on his bills, getting his truck repaired, maybe even being able to drive to Austin to see Tyler. "I can't authenticate it," Marcus said. "I can't afford the authentication process, and even if I could, I can't wait however long that takes. I need the money now." "I know," George said. "That's why I'm going to buy it from you directly. $2,000. Cash, today if you want." Marcus shook his head. "I can't let you do that." "Why not?" "Because it's charity. Because you feel sorry for me. Because I signed that record 23 years ago at a radio station, and your father won it fair and square, and it meant enough to him that he kept it for 2 decades, and now it could help his son get back on his feet," George said firmly. "That's not charity, Marcus. That's a fair transaction." "I insulted you yesterday," Marcus said almost desperately. "I basically told you that you couldn't afford your own autograph. You don't owe me anything." George smiled. "You were protecting your father's memory. I've got thick skin, Marcus. I've been in this business for 45 years. You think you're the first person to not recognize me or say something awkward? Hell, half the time I prefer it. Means I can just be George, not George Strait, country music icon." Marcus felt tears prickling at his eyes and blinked them back furiously. He would not cry in front of George Strait in a taco restaurant. He wouldn't. "Why are you doing this?" he asked quietly. George leaned back in his chair, considering the question. You know what I've learned in my life, Marcus? Success, real success, isn't measured by #1 hits or sold-out stadiums or awards on a shelf. It's measured by whether you helped someone when you had the chance. My nephew, when he was struggling after Iraq, he told me that what helped him most wasn't therapy or medication, although those were important. What helped was someone believing he could get better, believing he had value beyond his trauma. He paused, meeting Marcus's eyes directly. I believe you have value, Marcus. I believe you can get through this. And if buying a record I signed a quarter century ago helps you take one step forward, then that's not charity. That's just one human being helping another. Marcus couldn't stop the tears now. They ran down his face silently while George pretended not to notice, giving him the dignity of privacy in his emotion. Thank you, Marcus managed finally. Thank you. You're welcome. Now finish your breakfast. We've got business to conduct. 2 hours later, Marcus walked out of Lone Star Records with a cashier's check for $1,800 in his pocket. George had insisted on going through Patricia so she could get her commission and feel like part of the transaction, which had resulted in Patricia nearly fainting when she realized who was in her store for the second time in 2 days. George had taken the record, handling it with reverence, and said something that Marcus would replay in his mind for months afterward. Your father had good taste in music, and he raised a good son. That's worth more than any autograph. Before leaving, George had written his personal cell number on a napkin. Stay in touch, Marcus. Let me know how things go. And if you ever want to talk about your dad, about service, about anything, you call me. I mean that. Marcus had taken the napkin, folded it carefully, and put it in his wallet. Now, walking down Commerce Street in the late morning heat, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in years, possibility. The cashier's check in his pocket represented more than money. It represented time, time to catch his breath, time to figure out his next steps, time to maybe, possibly, start putting his life back together. He pulled out his phone and sent a text to Jennifer. Can I come see Tyler this weekend? I know it's short notice, but I'd really like to see him. The response came a few minutes later. He would love that. Saturday afternoon? Marcus smiled. Saturday afternoon. I'll be there. For the first time in longer than he could remember, Marcus Sullivan felt like maybe, just maybe, he might be able to climb out of the hole he'd been living in. He didn't know if George Strait realized what he'd done, didn't know if he understood that this wasn't just about money, but about dignity, about feeling like someone saw him as more than just his worst moments, about hope. But Marcus knew, and he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for the ordinary-looking stranger who'd walked into a record store and changed everything. The drive to Austin on Saturday felt different than Marcus had anticipated. His truck, a 2003 Ford Ranger that perpetually threatened to break down, but never quite did, ran smoothly for once, and the highway stretched out before him under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. He'd left San Antonio at noon, giving himself plenty of time to arrive by 3, when Jennifer had said Tyler would be home from baseball practice. Marcus had spent the previous 2 days in a whirlwind of activity. He'd paid Raymond Kowalski 4 months of back rent, which had shocked the trailer park manager into speechless appreciation. He'd bought groceries, real groceries, not just ramen and canned soup. He'd gotten a haircut at a proper barbershop instead of doing it himself with clippers. He'd even bought a new shirt for this visit, nothing fancy, just a dark blue polo that fit properly. But more than the external changes, something internal had shifted. The conversation with George had unlocked something in Marcus, a willingness to try that he'd lost somewhere in the mountains of Afghanistan. He'd called the VA and actually stayed on hold for 45 minutes until he got through to a real person who'd helped him check the status of his disability claim. Still processing, but at least he had information now. He'd called his therapist's office and scheduled an appointment, figuring he could afford 1 or 2 sessions with the money he'd saved. Small steps. That's what George had said during breakfast, after they'd finished discussing the record. Don't try to fix everything at once, Marcus. Just take small steps forward. 1 day at a time. 1 day at a time. 1 mile at a time. 1 conversation with his son at a time. Jennifer's house appeared on his right, a modest 2-story in a middle-class neighborhood with good schools, the kind of place Marcus had once imagined providing for his own family. Her husband Derek's truck sat in the driveway, a newer F-150 that made Marcus's Ranger look like a relic. Marcus felt the old inadequacy rising but pushed it down. He wasn't here to compare himself to Derek. He was here for Tyler. He parked on the street and walked to the front door, his heart hammering. Before he could knock, the door flew open and Tyler stood there, 12 years old, tall for his age, wearing a Spurs jersey and looking so much like Marcus at that age that it was startling. "Dad!" Tyler's face split into a grin, and then he was hugging Marcus, and Marcus was hugging back, and everything else fell away. "Hey, buddy," Marcus said, his voice thick. "Look at you. You grew another inch since I saw you last." 3 inches, Tyler corrected. "Mom says I'm going to be taller than you." "Probably will be. You eat better than I did as a kid." Jennifer appeared behind Tyler, looking cautiously optimistic. She was 39, pretty in an understated way, with brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. They'd met when Marcus was 23 and she was 20, both young and convinced that love could overcome anything. Turned out, love couldn't overcome PTSD and unemployment and the grinding stress of medical bills and arguments at 3 in the morning when Marcus woke up shouting. "Marcus," she said, "come in. We've got the patio set up. Derek's at work, so it'll just be the 3 of us." "That's fine. Thanks for doing this, Jen." They settled on the back patio, where Jennifer had put out lemonade and cookies. Tyler immediately launched into stories about baseball, making the team, playing second base, a kid named Aaron Martinez, who could pitch faster than anyone Tyler had ever seen. Marcus listened, asking questions, genuinely interested, and slowly felt the awkwardness begin to fade. "I'm proud of you, Tyler," Marcus said during a pause. "Making the team is a big deal. Are you working hard at it?" "Yeah. Practice is 4 days a week. Coach Martin says I've got good instincts." "Your grandfather would have loved that," Marcus said. "My dad, your grandpa Will, he loved baseball, took me to Astros games when I was your age." Tyler's expression grew curious. "I don't remember Grandpa Will much, just a little bit." "You were only 8 when he died, but he loved you. Used to say you had his eyes." Marcus paused, then decided to share something. "Actually, something related to your grandfather happened this week. Something kind of amazing." He told them the story, finding the George Strait record, trying to sell it, the encounter at Lone Star Records, the breakfast at Rosita's. He left out some of the more personal details, the stuff about PTSD and struggling, but he kept the core of it. An act of unexpected kindness from someone who had no obligation to care. Tyler's eyes were wide. "You met George Strait?" "Like the actual George Strait." "I did, and I didn't even know it was him at first." "That's so cool. Did he sing anything?" Marcus laughed. "No, we just talked. He's a good guy, Tyler, really down to earth. He asked me about Grandpa Will, about the cars we used to work on together." Jennifer was watching Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read. After a moment, she said, "Tyler, honey, can you go grab the baseball from your room? I want to see if your dad remembers how to catch." Tyler bounded inside, and Jennifer turned to Marcus. "You seem different. Better." "I'm trying to be." "What changed?" Marcus thought about how to answer that. "I guess, I hit bottom. And instead of just sitting there, I met someone who reminded me that I don't have to stay at the bottom." that there are people who still see something worth helping in me. Jennifer's eyes glistened. I never stopped seeing that, Marcus. That's not why we divorced. You know that, right? I know. You couldn't live with the person I became after I got back. I don't blame you for that, Jen. I couldn't live with that person either. Are you getting help? Real help? I'm trying. I've got an appointment with a therapist next week. The VA is processing my disability claim. I paid my back rent, got some breathing room. I know it's not everything, but it's a start. Jennifer reached across the table and squeezed his hand. It's more than a start. It's hope. Tyler needs to see that, Marcus. He needs to know his father is someone who keeps trying, even when things are hard. Tyler returned with the baseball, and they spent the next hour in the backyard, throwing the ball back and forth, Tyler demonstrating his pitching technique, Marcus offering tips he remembered from his own youth. It was ordinary. It was simple. It was everything. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Jennifer invited Marcus to stay for dinner. It felt strange, sitting at their table, eating spaghetti that Jennifer made, listening to Tyler talk about school and friends, and his science project about volcanoes. Strange, but good, like visiting a life that used to be his, or could have been, or might still be, in some different form. Derek came home around 7, a stocky guy with a friendly face who worked in IT. He shook Marcus's hand and didn't make things weird, which Marcus appreciated. They talked about sports and the weather and neutral topics, 3 adults navigating an unconventional situation with as much grace as possible. When it was time to leave, Tyler walked Marcus to his truck. "Will you come to one of my games?" Tyler asked. "We have one next Saturday in San Antonio, actually, against a team from your area." "I'll be there," Marcus promised. "Front row. I wouldn't miss it." Tyler hugged him again hard. "I'm glad you came, Dad." "Me too, buddy, me too." Driving back to San Antonio in the dark, Marcus felt lighter than he had in years. The visit hadn't fixed everything. His problems still existed. His trailer was still too hot. His job still didn't pay enough. But he'd reconnected with his son. He'd taken a step. His phone rang through the truck's ancient sound system. Unknown number. Marcus almost didn't answer, but something made him press the button on his steering wheel. "Hello? Marcus? It's George." Marcus nearly swerved. "George, hi. I wasn't expecting... I wanted to check in, see how your weekend went. You mentioned maybe visiting your son." "I just left Austin, actually." "It went really well, better than I hoped." "That's good to hear, real good." There was a pause. "Listen, I'm calling because I had an idea. That truck your father was restoring, the 67 F100, where is it?" "Storage unit on the south side." "Why?" "How would you feel about finishing it?" Marcus frowned. "I told you I can't afford..." "What if you didn't have to afford it? What if I covered the parts and you did the labor?" George said. "I've got a ranch outside San Antonio. Big workshop, all the tools you'd need. I'm there most weekends when I'm not on tour. Could use some help with a few projects I've got going, and it seems to me like working with your hands might be good for you. Plus, finishing your father's truck. That seems like something worth doing." Marcus didn't know what to say. This was beyond generous. This was life-changing. "Why would you do this?" Marcus asked again, the same question from breakfast. "Because I can," George said simply. "Because I've been blessed with more than I need, and you're someone who could use a hand up. Because finishing that truck might help you heal some things that need healing. And honestly, because I like working on old Fords, and I could use the company." Marcus felt tears threatening again. "I don't know how to thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait till you see how much work that truck needs," George said, and Marcus could hear the smile in his voice. "I'm serious about this, Marcus. If you want to do it, we'll get that truck out of storage next weekend and take a look at what we're dealing with. No pressure, no strings, just 2 guys working on a classic truck." "Yes," Marcus said. "Yes, I want to do this." "Good. I'll text you the address. Come by Saturday morning, around 9. Bring work clothes." After they hung up, Marcus drove in stunned silence for several miles. In the span of 1 week, his life had transformed. Not completely, he still had a long way to go, but enough to see a path forward where before there had only been darkness. His father's truck. The project that had sat unfinished for 4 years, that Marcus had avoided because it hurt too much to touch. Now he would finish it, with the help of a man his father had admired, at a ranch he never could have imagined having access to. Sometimes, Marcus thought, life surprises you. Sometimes, when you're at your lowest, a stranger in a record store turns out to be exactly who you needed to meet. Sometimes grace appears in the most unexpected forms. The storage unit door rolled up with a metallic screech, revealing Marcus's past covered in a layer of dust. The 1967 Ford F-100 sat exactly where he'd left it 4 years ago. Primer grey, missing its front bumper, interior partially disassembled. Boxes of parts surrounded it like artifacts from another life. George stood beside him, hands on his hips, surveying the truck with an appreciative eye. They'd met at the storage facility at 8 in the morning, before the Texas heat became unbearable. George had arrived in a black Chevy Silverado, wearing work jeans and a faded Austin City Limits t-shirt, looking every bit like a regular guy about to spend Saturday working on trucks. "She's a beauty," George said. "Your dad had good taste. This body style is iconic." "He bought it for $800 from an estate sale," Marcus said, running his hand along the dusty hood. "Spent 2 years collecting parts, planning the restoration. He was going to make it cherry red, rebuild the engine, upgrade the suspension. We'd just started the real work when he died." "What would you want to do with it?" George asked. "Finish it the way he planned, or make it your own?" Marcus had thought about this during the week. Both, I think. Keep the red, keep the major plans he had, but add some touches that are mine, make it a collaboration across time, you know? "I like that," George said. He walked around the truck, occasionally crouching to examine something, pointing out rust spots and areas that would need attention. His knowledge was impressive, not just surface-level car guy knowledge, but deep mechanical understanding. Engine's out, which is good. Easier to work on. Frame looks solid, minimal rust. Cab needs work, but it's salvageable. I'd say 6 months of steady weekends, we could have her running. 6 months. It sounded both impossibly long and incredibly short. 6 months of weekends meant 24 days of work. 24 days of connection to his father's memory. 24 days of building something instead of just surviving. "Let's do it," Marcus said. They spent the morning loading parts into George's truck and arranging for a tow truck to move the F-100 to George's ranch. By noon, they were driving through the hill country, the landscape opening up into rolling terrain dotted with live oaks and cedar. George's ranch appeared after they turned off the highway onto a private road. It wasn't ostentatious, no mansion, no elaborate gates, just a well-maintained property with a large barn, a modest house, and what looked like a professional-grade workshop beside it. Horses grazed in a distant pasture. The whole place had the feel of a working ranch owned by someone who actually used it, not a celebrity retreat. "This is beautiful," Marcus said as they pulled up to the workshop. "It's home," George said simply. "Bought this place 30 years ago, before things got really crazy with the career. Needed somewhere I could just be myself, work with my hands, remember where I came from." The workshop was impressive. 2 bays, every tool imaginable mounted on the walls, a lift in one bay, and a collection of vehicles in various states of restoration scattered around. Marcus recognized a vintage Corvette, what looked like a 1950s Cadillac, and a pristine Indian motorcycle. "You've been busy," Marcus observed. "Keeps me sane," George said. "Touring, recording, all the business side of music, it can make you forget who you are. This reminds me, getting my hands dirty, building something tangible that grounds me." They spent the afternoon unloading parts and setting up a workspace for the F-100. George worked alongside Marcus, not directing but collaborating, asking Marcus's opinion, sharing stories about his own restoration projects. Gradually, Marcus began to relax, to forget about the awkwardness of the situation, that he was in a country music legend's workshop, that this was surreal beyond belief, and just enjoy the work. Around 3, a woman appeared from the house carrying a cooler. She was probably in her late 60s, with short blonde hair and warm eyes, dressed in jeans and a button-up shirt. "Figured you boys might be thirsty," she said. "Marcus, this is my wife, Norma," George said, introducing them. "Norma, this is Marcus Sullivan, the one I told you about." Norma shook Marcus's hand with a firm grip. "George mentioned you were coming to work on your father's truck. That's real nice. He's been excited about it all week, which is saying something. Usually, I can't get him excited about anything except rodeo season." They sat in folding chairs outside the workshop, drinking cold beer and eating sandwiches Norma had brought. She asked Marcus about Tyler, about his time in San Antonio, about his service. She had the same quality as George, genuine interest without pity, curiosity without intrusion. "Our son served," Norma mentioned at one point. "Navy. He's doing well now, but there were some hard years after he got out. We didn't understand what he was going through at first. Wish we'd known better how to help." Marcus nodded. It was a common story. Families wanting to help but not knowing how, veterans not knowing how to ask or too proud to admit they needed help. "The hardest part," Marcus said, "is feeling like you don't fit anywhere anymore. You're not a soldier anymore, but you can't go back to being who you were before. You're stuck in between." "So you find a new way forward," George said. "You build something new that incorporates the old parts but isn't trapped by them. Like this truck. Honoring what your father started, but making it yours too." Marcus looked at George, understanding the metaphor. Yeah, like the truck. As the afternoon wore on, they started the initial assessment of the F-100's engine, a 352 V8 that William Sullivan had partially rebuilt before his death. George taught Marcus how to properly inspect components, shared tricks for identifying problems, and demonstrated the kind of patience that comes from decades of experience. "Your father was doing good work here," George said, examining the cylinder heads. "See how he cleaned these? Proper attention to detail. He knew what he was doing." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. He was a good mechanic, one of the best. "I can tell, and he raised a good son. That's obvious too." They worked until sunset painted the sky in shades of orange and purple. When Marcus finally checked his phone, he was startled to see it was almost 8 o'clock. The day had disappeared, the hours passing in that timeless way that happens when you're absorbed in meaningful work. "You should come back next Saturday," George said, as they were cleaning up. "We'll start on the frame restoration, get the suspension sorted out. Bring Tyler if he wants to come. Might be good for him to see what his grandfather was building." "He'd love that," Marcus said. "Thank you, George, for all of this." "Stop thanking me. We're friends now, Marcus. Friends help each other. Friends." The word settled over Marcus like a warm blanket. When was the last time he'd had a real friend? Someone who wanted his company not out of obligation or pity, but genuine connection. Driving home that night, Marcus's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize, but something made him answer. "Marcus Sullivan." "Yes, this is Captain Janet Rodriguez from the VA Regional Office. I'm calling about your disability claim. I have good news. Your claim has been approved at the 80% disability rating. Your first payment will be processed within 10 days, and you'll receive back pay from your filing date." Marcus almost pulled over. 80% disability. That was roughly $1,800 a month. Combined with his job at Lone Star Records, that was enough to live on. That was enough to move out of the trailer, maybe rent a small apartment. That was enough to regularly visit Tyler, to start building a real life again. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you so much." After hanging up, Marcus did pull over into the parking lot of a closed gas station. He sat there with the engine running and let himself cry, really cry. Not the silent tears of shame, but the kind of crying that releases something held too long. Everything was changing. The money from the record sale, the reconnection with Tyler, the friendship with George, the truck project, and now the disability approval. It felt like the universe, after kicking him while he was down for years, had suddenly decided to offer a hand up. Marcus pulled out his phone and sent a text to George. "Just got word my VA claim was approved. Wanted you to know, none of this would have happened without you." The response came quickly. "That's wonderful news, Marcus. You deserved every bit of that approval. Proud of you for keeping at it. See you next Saturday." Then Marcus did something he hadn't done in years. He opened his contacts, scrolled to his mother's number. They'd barely spoken since his father died, their relationship strained by grief and distance, and pressed call. "Marcus." His mother's voice was surprised, cautious. "Hi, Mom. I know it's late. I wanted to tell you that I'm working on Dad's truck, the F-100. I'm going to finish it." There was a pause, then a sound that might have been a sob. "Oh, Marcus, your father would be so happy." "I think he would be. I'm doing better, Mom. I want you to know that. I'm getting help, spending time with Tyler, working on the truck. Things are turning around." They talked for 20 minutes, really talked, for the first time since William Sullivan's funeral. His mother was living in Corpus Christi, working part-time at a library, trying to build her own new life after loss. They promised to stay in better touch, to visit each other soon, to stop letting grief keep them apart. When Marcus finally made it back to his trailer, it didn't feel quite as suffocating as usual. He knew he'd be moving out soon, finding somewhere better, but for now, it was okay. It was shelter. It was temporary. It was just one step on a longer journey. He pulled out the napkin George had given him at breakfast, the one with his personal number, and pinned it to the small corkboard beside his door. Next to it, he pinned a photo of Tyler from baseball practice that Jennifer had texted him. Below that, he pinned the business card from George Strait that Patricia had given him and a receipt from Rosita's that he'd saved. Small things, reminders, evidence that life could surprise you, that strangers could become friends, that your lowest moment might be right before everything changed. Marcus lay down on his bed, and for the first time in months, he fell asleep quickly, without nightmares, without fear. He dreamed of a cherry-red truck driving down a Texas highway, his father in the passenger seat, both of them smiling. The F-100 sat in George's workshop, transformed. The frame had been sandblasted and powder-coated. The suspension was rebuilt. The engine, completely overhauled over a dozen Saturday sessions, gleamed like jewelry. The body had been meticulously repaired, every dent addressed, every rust spot eliminated, ready for paint. Marcus stood looking at it, Tyler beside him. They'd been coming to the ranch together most weekends, Tyler learning about tools and engines, asking George endless questions about music and trucks and life. The boy had started bringing his guitar, and sometimes after working on the F-100, George would play a song or two, teaching Tyler chords, sharing the craft that had defined his life. "It's starting to look like Grandpa's plan," Tyler said. "It really is," Marcus agreed. He'd moved into a small two-bedroom apartment in San Antonio last month, specifically choosing one large enough that Tyler could have his own room when he visited. The VA disability combined with a promotion at Lone Star Records, Patricia had made him assistant manager, meant he could afford it. He'd furnished Tyler's room with care, putting up posters of the Spurs and hanging a photo of William Sullivan with the F-100 on the wall. George emerged from the house, followed by Jennifer and Derek, who'd driven down for the day. It had been George's idea to invite them, to make the project's progress a family celebration. She's looking good, Derek said, walking around the truck appreciatively. He and Marcus had developed a cordial relationship built on mutual respect and the understanding that they both wanted what was best for Tyler. "Another month, and we'll have her painted," George said. "Then it's just interior and details. Could be driving her by Christmas." "Dad, you should drive it to Austin to pick me up sometime," Tyler said. "That would be so cool." "That's the plan," Marcus said, ruffling his son's hair. Norma appeared with iced tea and cookies. She'd become something of a surrogate grandmother to Tyler, doting on him in the way grandparents do. They all sat in the chairs outside the workshop, talking and laughing, the easy conversation of people who'd become comfortable with each other. At one point, George pulled Marcus aside. "How are you doing? Really?" "Better," Marcus said honestly. "The therapy's helping. I'm sleeping better, started attending a veterans group that actually doesn't make me want to run away. I feel like I'm building a life instead of just surviving one." "That's good, Marcus, real good," George paused. "I've been thinking about something. There's a program I support, helps veterans transition to civilian life through vocational training. They're always looking for instructors for their mechanics program. Would you be interested?" "Teaching mechanics? Why not? You know your stuff, you're good with people when you're not stressed out, and you understand what these guys are going through. Pays decent, has benefits, just something to think about." Marcus considered it. Teaching, helping other veterans, using his skills for something meaningful. "I'd like that, yeah, I'd really like that." As the day wound down and people started leaving, Marcus found himself alone with George for a moment. The sun was setting, painting the ranch in golden light. "I never properly thanked you," Marcus said, "for everything. The record, the truck, the friendship, the opportunities. You changed my life, George." George shook his head. "You changed your own life, Marcus. I just reminded you that you could. There's a difference. Still, I won't forget it. I know you won't. That's the thing about people who've been through hard times. They remember kindness. They pay it forward." George looked at the F-100. "That truck is going to be something special when it's done, but it's not the truck that matters, Marcus. It's what building it has done for you. The healing, the connections, the purpose, that's what your father would have wanted." Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Now get out of here," George said, breaking the moment with a smile. "You've got work Monday morning, and Tyler's got school. I'll see you next Saturday." Driving home with Tyler in the passenger seat, Marcus felt at peace. Not the absence of problems. He still had hard days, still struggled sometimes, still had work to do on himself. But the kind of peace that comes from knowing you're moving in the right direction. "Dad," Tyler said, as they merged onto the highway. "Yeah, buddy? I'm proud of you, for finishing Grandpa's truck, for getting better, for being my dad." Marcus had to blink back tears for what felt like the 100th time that day. "Thanks, Tyler. That means everything to me." As they drove through the Texas night, Marcus thought about the chain of events that had brought him here. A desperate decision to sell his father's record, a chance encounter with a stranger in a music store. A moment of unintentional comedy, telling George Strait he couldn't afford his own autograph that had somehow opened a door to redemption. Life was strange like that. Your worst moments could become turning points. Your lowest days could be the beginning of something better. You just had to keep showing up, keep trying, keep believing that the next chapter might be different. The F-100 would be done by Christmas, cherry red and perfect, a rolling tribute to William Sullivan's skill and Marcus's perseverance. But more than that, it would be a symbol of healing, of connections forged, of grace received and eventually paid forward. Because Marcus knew, with absolute certainty, that he would spend the rest of his life helping other veterans the way George had helped him. Not with money or fame, but with presence, with listening, with the simple revolutionary act of seeing someone's value when they couldn't see it themselves. The road ahead was long, but Marcus Sullivan was finally ready to travel it. 1 mile at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 act of kindness at a time.